この番組はコナミとご覧のスポンサーの提供でお送りします。
I've been thinking a lot about Yu-Gi-Oh! GX lately. Yeah, I know, big shocker. But that got me thinking about the cards of those days and just how outright terrible the manga hero cards were at their inception. You ever get the feeling you've been somewhere before? Today, we're finally at the long-awaited conclusion to this show, and a return to where we began, with the Elemental Heroes. Yes, it's true, the E-Heroes didn't just fade into obscurity after the GX anime ended, they got a full return to basics with the creation of the GX manga. Technically, the manga existed during the anime's run, but most of these didn't actually start seeing release until it was already on its last legs, and people generally separate them anyway, so whatever. The GX manga's lineup is pretty famous for being what made Heroes good in the first place, so they've got quite the legacy to live up to. Yes, folks, here we are, the final episode of Start to Finish, A History of Hero. A one-off video I made on a whim that ballooned into a full-on series that took far too long to complete, to the point where my content has taken multiple new directions during the production of these, making them the only oddly consistent thing I've ever produced. Funny how that works out. To ease us into this final outing, let's look at the last cards you could potentially call part of the classic lineup of E-Heroes. But they weren't ever actually used by Jaden anywhere. Elemental Hero Neos Alias is a light level 4 warrior Gemini effect monster with 1900 attack and 1300 defense. He's got the standard Gemini effect, and when you re-normal summon him, his name is treated as Elemental Hero Neos on the field. Alias is quite an infamous member of this family. Anyone who was around back in his heyday will instantly recognize how important he used to be as the poster child of Gemini Beat. He provided a generic baseline for the Omni Heroes to be summoned with, he was a Gemini Spark and Hero Blast target, and was a respectable beatstick back when that still meant something, making him the centerpiece of the entire archetype for his time. He's a pretty terrible Neos monster, and even worse Gemini monster, but managed to utilize those unique properties arguably better than any Gemini before or since in his home archetype. He deserves his spot in the Hero Hall of Fame, for a good reason. Next up, we have the greatest hero you've never heard of. From the 25th century, here's Elemental Hero Captain Gold.
Protecting his past to ensure your future.
And now that we're actually in the future, we can finally talk about him. Gold is a level 4 light warrior effect monster with 2100 attack and 800 defense. You can discard him from your hand to the graveyard, add one Skyscraper from your deck to your hand, and if Skyscraper's not on your field, he's instantly destroyed. Before we had the Link 1 that searches the field spell, we had this. Gold shares his concept with a lot of other archetypal monsters with similar effects, but his usefulness is probably a lot more niche comparatively. There's certainly clever ways you could use him, especially in an archetype as robust as the E-Heroes, but I wouldn't blame you for leaving him forgotten to history. You know, that is until his best friend was killed by Chaos Maxwell Lord, and then he got into the Crisis reboot treatment, got erased from the timeline for a bit, and then Dan Jurgens started writing him again. But then that stuff with Jeff Johns happened, and I don't really know where he is in the continuity right now. Moving on to the real meat of this episode, we have the first of Jaden's manga heroes, Elemental Hero Ocean. He's a level 4 water warrior with 1500 attack and 1200 defense, and once per turn, during your standby phase, you can target one hero monster you control or in your graveyard, and return that target to the hand. Ocean was, for the longest time, the best water target you could hope for, and he served that purpose well until Bubble Man started to get popular. His recycling effect is slow by today's standards, but back in the day it was one of the most reliable ways to recycle your big playmakers like a Stratos. He's one of my personal favorites too, and held a spot in my deck for years post his prime. With water comes earth, and with that we have Elemental Hero Woodsman. He's a level 4 Earth Warrior with 1000 attack and 2000 defense, and once per turn, during your standby phase, you can add one Polymerization from your deck or graveyard to your hand. Woodsman is basically in that same boat as Ocean, though arguably with a lesser pedigree. Recycling Polymerization alone just isn't as handy, especially when you have cards like Fusion Recovery or Miracle at your disposal. He was better than Clayman, of course, and was one of the better Earth targets you could choose, but it wasn't exactly always a long list of choices. He's wasted potential, if anything. But by their powers combined, here is Elemental Hero Terra Firma. He's a level 8 Earth Warrior Fusion with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. He must be fusion summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. You contribute one face-up Elemental Hero monster to give him that monster's attack points until the end phase. And of course, he requires Ocean and Woodsman. Throwing him in early, since we technically already talked about him once before, and because it's my show and I wanted to. The theming here is cute, if nothing else, but Terra Firma's use is just as a blunt instrument, and that's really all he is. There's some utility to be had with Absolute Zero, but that's been long surpassed by mass change at this point. If he was a bit more generic, he might be a little bit more splashable and find more use, but even with how overdone attack manipulation is in hero monsters, I can't see this being one of the better OTKers. And yes, he does look like Frieza. Next up, we have one of the most defining cards, not just for heroes, but the entire game of Yu-Gi-Oh! With Elemental Hero Stratos. He's a level 4 Wind Warrior with 1800 attack and 300 defense, and his effect reads, when he is normal or special summoned, you can activate one of these effects. You can either destroy spell and traps on the field up to the number of heroes you control, except him, or you can add one hero monster from your deck to your hand. Alright, get your unfunny jokes out of the way. Can we move on? Good. Infamously, Stratos set the template for archetypal searchers, to the point where cards that share similar effects are literally called a Stratos. If that wasn't good enough, he also has a rarely used secondary effect based on Righteous Justice, which can come in handy more than you might think. To this day, he's also one of the 2 main deck heroes that are wind attribute shared with Avion. Yeah, that made things problematic while he was banned and they kept making wind heroes that needed summoning material. Also, yes, he was once banned, because the enemy of all Yu-Gi-Oh! Players are apparently chickens that would make Slifer the Sky Dragon cry. Just thank the Sacred Beast this did not get its manga effect. Elemental Hero Heat is a level 4 Fire Pyro effect monster with 1600 attack and 1200 defense, and he gains 200 attack for each elemental hero you control, including himself. Ah, Heat, you poor, poor tragic thing, you. Heat is a beat stick, and only a beat stick. He's okay at that, and another tragic example of what hero effects would devolve into in the years to come, but for his time, he was just there to be your only viable fire option. Well, that is unless you wanted to run Elemental Hero Lady Heat, who is also a level 4 Fire Pyro effect monster, but with 1300 attack and 1000 defense. During each of your end phases, inflict 200 damage to your opponent for each face-up E-Hero monster you control. You know, I always see people saying we need retrains of classic heroes, but after seeing their pitch for Burstinatrix 2, I'm not so sure. Lady Heat honestly feels like a really bad joke about burn damage, and that's about as generous a compliment as I can give her. Outside sharing a pretty cool design aesthetic with her boyfriend over there. And from these 2 fire brands, we get a really underwhelming monster. Elemental Hero Inferno is a level 8 Fire Pyro Fusion effect monster that requires Heat and Lady Heat and has 2300 attack and 1600 defense. He must be fusion summoned and cannot be special summoned by other ways. If this card battles a water monster, he gains 1000 attack during the damage step. Okay, I know I've said this about a lot of cards already, but I think Inferno actually is the worst hero monster in the entire game. Even with his manga-only spell card retrieval, I couldn't see anybody wanting to play this guy, like, at all in today's day and age. Leaving the extra deck behind once again, we have Elemental Hero Voltic. He's a level 4 Light Thunder monster with 1000 attack and 1500 defense. When this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, you can target one of your banished elemental hero monsters to special summon that target. Voltic is a bit of an underrated tech choice, but not a bad one by any stretch. I've actually always really enjoyed trying to fit him into builds if I can spare the room, especially since I'm a sucker for electricity themes. With how banish-heavy heroes have always been, he's not too out of place no matter what format you play him in. The only real downside is that his attack stat could be a lot better in and battle effects are a bit iffy sometimes. I've already gone over him in a previous video where I was discussing niche hero techs and strategies, so check that out if you want some more examples of what I'm talking about. Elemental hero Nosp, or Nops, or Knosp, Nosp, is a level 3 earth plant monster with 600 attack and 1000 defense. Each time this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, it gains 100 attack and loses 100 defense. While you control another face-up elemental hero monster, your opponent cannot target this card for an attack, and this card can attack your opponent directly. It is so hard to be nice to this card. Not only does it look more like a rejected Naturia than an elemental hero, but it's probably got one of the most agonizingly below average effects I've ever seen. The only thing that I could maybe see this being useful for is if you set up one of those Magician's Valkyria locks, but that's not exactly super helpful or relevant in today's day and age, nor was it extremely relevant back then. Which just leads me into Elemental Hero Poison Rose, a level 6 earth plant monster with 1900 attack and 2000 defense. She cannot be normal summoned or set and must be only special summoned through Rosebud. Each time this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent, it gains 200 attack and loses 200 defense. Your opponent can only target Elemental Hero Poison Rose for attacks. Okay, I take back what I said about Inferno. Poison Rose just perplexes me. It's like the mangaka saw Mirage Knight and felt it was too logistically sound and needed something to counterbalance immediately. And what is Rosebud, you may ask? Rosebud is a normal spell, and its effect is to tribute one Nosp to special summon one Poison Rose from your hand or deck. It exists only to summon Poison Rose. That is its function. I will not dignify this card with further discussion. Back on track, we have Elemental Hero Ice Edge. He's a level 3 water warrior monster with 800 attack and 900 defense, and his effect reads, when this card inflicts battle damage to your opponent by direct attack, you can target one set card in your opponent's spell and trap zone and destroy that target. Once per turn, during your main phase 1, you can discard one card, and this card can attack directly this turn. While he's not nearly the useful water target that Ocean was back in the day, his effect is still pretty neat and offers some unique utility, though the discard cost is a bit hefty even for his time, and that effect these days won't really net you any quick wins. Still, he's an interesting tech option that you might be able to squeeze some interesting plays out of. Again, see that other video I made for further details. Elemental Hero Flash is a level 4 light warrior monster with 1100 attack and 1600 defense. When this card is destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can banish it and 3 other E-heroes from your graveyard with different names to target one normal spell in your graveyard and add it to your hand. For being the only hero monster that actually shares a name with an iconic comic book character, he certainly doesn't do the legacy any justice. In the manga, his effect was stupidly busted to the point of needing heavy retooling, which unfortunately killed his potential so badly, no self-respecting duelist even bothers to try and remember he exists, let alone play him. You can just leave this one trapped in the Speed Force where he belongs. Elemental Hero Shadow Mist is a level 4 Dark Warrior with 1000 attack and 1500 defense. If this card is special summoned, you can add one Change quick play spell from your deck to your hand. If this card is sent to the graveyard, you can add one hero monster from your deck to your hand except Shadow Mist, and you can only use one of Shadow Mist's effects per turn and only once that turn. Another one partially covered previously due to gaining a link to Jaden's other manga deck when brought over to the TCG. Everything I said about her in that video applies here. She's ridiculously useful and came along right when the deck needed her most post Stratos' ban. And by the way, as of this video, the Mask Heroes still don't have any main deck monsters. Lovely. Also, funny story with this one, most people don't even seem to realize that she's from the manga, because she appeared in the final duel, and I guess not a lot of people paid attention to the GX manga at that point. So yeah, if you didn't know that, she is from the manga. We have a little bit of an oddity next with Phantom Magician, a level 3 Dark Spellcaster effect monster with 600 attack and 700 defense. When he's destroyed by battle and sent to the graveyard, you can special summon one hero monster with 1000 or less attack from your deck and face up defense position. I realize I really should have put this guy in the Vision Hero episode because it was a generic monster used by Aster to summon Vion in the manga. In the real game, it was made generic hero support, and if it had come out back in the early days of the archetype, I could have seen it being pretty useful. Unfortunately, it didn't, and Mystic Tomato-like effects just aren't what they used to be. Well, we're past the manga main deck lineup now, and we can talk about a little bit of the legacy support that was also never played by Jaden in anything. Starting with Elemental Hero Blazeman. He's a level 4 Fire Warrior with 1200 attack and 1800 defense. And his effect reads, if this card is normal or special summoned, you can add 1 polymerization from your deck to your hand. During your main phase, you can activate this effect, but cannot special summon monsters for the rest of this turn except fusions. Then you can send 1 Elemental Hero monster from your deck to the graveyard except Blazeman, and if you do, he copies that monster's stats and attribute until the end of the turn, and you can only use 1 of Blazeman's effects per turn, and only once that turn. I'm in the minority here by saying I really love Blazeman. Sure, Vion came along and did his whole thing like 1,000 times more consistently, but I'll always hold a soft spot for the guy. He showed up right around the time Mist did, and was obviously intended to be the perfect combo piece with her, and was for me at the time. Remember, Stratos was still banned back then, so a normal summon that netted you a search was just good to have no matter what. Sure, he's aged a bit poorly, but I'll always love him. Elemental Hero Solid Soldier is a level 4 Earth Warrior monster with 1300 attack and 1100 defense. When this card is normal summoned, you can special summon 1 level 4 or lower hero monster from your hand. If this card is sent from the monster zone to the graveyard by a spell effect, you can target 1 hero monster in your graveyard, except Solid Soldier, special summon it in defense mode. You can only use this effect of Solid Soldier once per turn. The second in the modern wave of new elemental heroes, Solid was made seemingly to help heroes with board spamming just to get a Link monster out, since he released around that time. He does that job pretty well, even if he did have a bad tendency to get negated. His floating effect is pretty good comboed with polymerization, leading to all sorts of funky revival plays that can net you a few extra searches or materials on board. It took them a few years, but they finally got a solid Earth target. That pun was not intended. Following the theme, we have Elemental Hero Liquid Soldier. Okay, can I just say I hate that name? Like, you have Solid Soldier, which works, right? Because it's alliterative, but Liquid Soldier just doesn't roll off the tongue, like, in the slightest, and Liquid Man sounded perfectly fine. If they were gonna change the name, they should have come up with something creative, like the anime did when it translated all the other heroes, Featherman to Avion, Burst Lady, Burstinatrix, like, call it, like, I don't know, Liquidizer or something, creative and interesting. He's a level 4 Water Warrior with 1400 attack and 1300 defense. His effect is that when he's normal summoned, you can target 1 level 4 or lower hero in your graveyard except himself and special summon it. If he's sent to the graveyard or banished as a material for a fusion summon, for a hero monster, you can draw 2 cards, then discard 1. Obviously, you can only use 1 of his effects per turn, and only once that turn. Liquid is the water target heroes needed for ages. It works great as a revival card, and as draw 2 is a cute nod to Bubble Man's extremely difficult to pull off effect. And yes, Blazeman is meant to be part of this as a trio. Stop asking for Flame Soldier. Not only would that be a really stupid name, they're literally already meant to parallel each other in visual and effect design. I mean, they literally all have the same, once per turn clause worded in the exact same way, guys. Come on. Our final main deck monster is Elemental Hero Honest Neos. He's a level 7 Light Warrior monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. Quick effect, you can discard this card, then target 1 hero on the field. It gains 2500 attack until the end of this turn. Also a quick effect, you can discard a hero monster, and this card gains attack equal to the discarded monster's attack until the end of the turn. You can only use each effect of Honest Neos once per turn. I think it's fitting that the final main deck monster of this series harkens back to Jaden's Ace Monster, and while he isn't a great update as far as a Neos card goes, he's a great hand trap for heroes, and that's all he needs to be considered good, and honestly a bit of a staple. Now, it's time for what you've all been waiting for. We're finally going to look at the infamous Omni-Heroes, or so they've been called by the community for years. These guys change the landscape for the deck with their more generic summoning requirements, which is a design philosophy that echoes through the archetype to this day. The first we ever saw in the manga was Elemental Hero Gaia. Gaia is a level 6 Earth Warrior fusion monster with 2200 attack and 2600 defense. He requires 1 Elemental Hero and 1 Earth monster, and he must be special summoned and cannot be summoned by other ways. When this card is fusion summoned, you can target 1 face-up monster your opponent controls until the end phase. Its attack is halved, and this card gains that same amount of attack. Gaia is about as beat stick can be. He's good for 1 swing and then is more or less a sitting duck. Still, he's saved by the versatility of his materials, and these days you can never be too careful with those statues running around. Elemental Hero The Shining is a level 8 light warrior monster with 2600 attack and 2100 defense. He requires an E-hero and a light monster. He cannot be special summoned except by fusion summon, and he gains 300 attack for each of your banished E-heroes. When this card is sent from the field to the graveyard, you can target up to 2 of your banished Elemental Hero monsters and add them back to your hand. This is probably one of the most famous cards in the entire deck. Alongside Alias, this was the headliner of Gemini Beat thanks to how well he complemented the playstyle, and being one of the 3 Omni heroes even out at that time. He hasn't aged particularly well, especially due to that missing the timing in his wording, but he couldn't hurt to play, especially if you can spare the room. Here he is, the man, the myth, the legend, the trading card, and my favorite hero and card in the game of all time, needing no further introduction, Elemental Hero Absolute Zero. He's a level 8 Water Warrior Fusion monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. He requires 1 hero monster and 1 water monster. He must be fusion summoned, and he gains 500 attack for each water monster on the field except himself. If this card leaves the field, destroy all monsters your opponent controls. What can I really say about Absolute Zero? Aside from that heavy emotional significance to me, he's one of the best hero monsters ever printed. His effect was so devastating back in the day, even if he wasn't that popular of a choice compared to The Shining, and that only got better when Acid came out to complement that. He has one of the most generic hero summoning requirements in the game, which has made him be able to survive as a staple for years, and he's still the premier Omni hero in most people's decks. He's the mascot of my channel, my favorite card, and my lifelong dueling partner. Thanks for everything, buddy. Elemental Hero Great Tornado is a level 8 Wind Warrior Fusion monster with 2800 attack and 2200 defense. He requires 1 E-hero and 1 Wind monster. He must be fusion summoned, and when you do summon him, he can have the attack and defense of all face-up monsters your opponent currently controls. Tornado is kind of just a better Gaia, though for years he was basically unplayable in the TCG unless you were running Avion for some godforsaken reason, or were getting cute with Super Poly and alternative targets or something. He's actually pretty relevant, shockingly enough, thanks to the continued proof of the absence of God that is the barrier statues. Elemental Hero Escuridao, I only know how to pronounce that because of Duel Links, is a level 8 Dark Warrior Fusion monster with 2500 attack and 2000 defense. She requires 1 Elemental Hero monster and 1 Dark monster, and she must be fusion summoned. She gains 100 attack for each E-hero monster in the graveyard. She's unfortunately very underwhelming for being the final form of a card as good as Shadow Mist, but she came out years prior, so you can't really blame her for that. I actually remember buying Volume 9 of GX back in the day specifically to get her when it dropped, but I can't say she's aged super well, not even as a Super Poly target because of how, well, Starving Venom exists. Elemental Hero Nova Master is a level 8 Fire Warrior with 2600 attack and 2100 defense. He requires an E-hero and a fire monster, can only be fusion summoned, and if he destroys a monster by battle, he can let you draw 1 card. Something a lot of people don't realize is this monster isn't actually from the manga. If being a knockoff of Zero's design didn't cue you in, Inferno being from the manga should. Yeah, believe it or not, Inferno was supposed to be the Fire Omni hero, but because Konami decided to make the manga fusions not suck after a while, they actually had to rectify his lack of Omni hero status with a TCG original that followed the theme. What he is on his own is pretty passable. It worked okay for back in the day, but like I've implied multiple times before, fire heroes have never really been handled with very much care, so why should we expect any different here? Our final hero monster from the manga is Elemental Hero Core. He's a level 9 Earth Warrior Fusion monster with 2700 attack and 2200 defense. He requires 3 Elemental Hero monsters and he must be fusion summoned. Once per turn, when this card is targeted for an attack, you can make this card's attack becomes double its current attack until the end of the damage step. At the end of the battle phase, if this card battled, you can target 1 monster on the field and destroy it. When this card is destroyed by battle or card effect, you can target 1 level 8 or lower E-hero fusion from your graveyard and special summon it, ignoring the summoning conditions. A final form of Terra Firma, and an infinitely better monster at that. I'm a real sucker for triple fusions, and he's one of the only 3 heroes even have, so I'm glad he's not some unplayable nonsense. Mind you, he's not gonna tear up worlds or anything, but any card that lets you ignore the stupid can only be fusion summoned rule printed on practically every elemental hero fusion is automatically worth something in my book. We're back to cards that have never appeared in any sort of media with Elemental Hero Grand Merge. He's a level 6 Light Warrior fusion with 0 attack and 0 defense. He requires 2 normal hero monsters, must be fusion summoned, and he gains attack and defense equal to the combined original levels of his materials times 300. When he destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can float him into a hero fusion monster from your extra deck, ignoring its summoning conditions, but it cannot attack monsters with an equal or lower level. Yeah, I know, I covered him in the first video, but I didn't even go over his effect in that one, and hadn't even planned on making another video in the series at that point anyway, so I thought it was only fair that I finally cover him in earnest. While he is quite gimmicky, I think he's really fun and far more playable now than when I first brought him up, thanks mostly due to Infernal Devicer being a thing. Mind you, he's a massive win more kind of card, since the high level stuff you'd want to float into could probably only hit the field if you were in a winning position as is. Doesn't stop him from being stupid and fun though, which is kind of the whole point. The last monster we have for today is Elemental Hero Sunrise. He's a level 7 Light Warrior fusion monster with 2500 attack and 1200 defense. He requires 2 hero monsters with different attributes, thank god, must be fusion summoned, and monsters you control gain 200 attack for each different attribute you control. You can only use each of the following effects of Sunrise once per turn. If this card is fusion summoned, you can add 1 Miracle Fusion from your deck to your hand. When an attack is declared involving another hero monster you control, you can target 1 card on the field, destroy it. Sunrise was always destined for greatness because of his Miracle Search alone. Anything that can grab that card for free was going to become a mainstay, and his great material requirements and added attack gain with Pop Effect only solidified that further. It's funny to think that he's the first truly original hero fusion we've gotten outside any sphere of influence since the show and manga ended. Grand Merge was obviously derivative of pre-existing hero concepts, as were Core and Nova. Funny enough, not Sunrise. He's completely new from the ground up, which is pretty weird and very cool. We're finally done with the monsters, so let's talk about the spells. Hero's Bond is a normal spell, and its effect reads, if there's a face-up hero monster on the field, special summon 2 level 4 or lower elemental heroes from your hand. This is a card I'm a bit of a sucker for, mostly because of the artwork. I love it when archetypes get group shots, and this one is right up there with Fifth Hope for me and how cool it looks. Anyway, effect-wise, it really served no purpose when it came out, unless you wanted yet another way to attempt to turbo out Neos by making tribute fodder, but there were better ways to do that even then. No, this is actually a lot more hypothetically useful these days with links. I say hypothetically because most people aren't gonna go that route, but hey, it is a thing you can mess around with. Parallel World Fusion is a normal spell, and it reads, fusion summon 1 elemental hero fusion monster from your extra deck by shuffling your banished fusion materials listed on it into your deck. You cannot special summon monsters except by this card's effect during the turn you activate this card. This just pains me with how much potential is wasted on that special summon restriction. That is such a brutal drawback for just another fusion on board. Even if it could have been a decent comeback option in Gemini Beat like more than a decade ago. Holy shit, I'm old. Legacy of a Hero is a normal spell, and it says to return 2 fusion monsters from your graveyard to the extra deck that list a hero as material to draw 3 cards. You can only activate 1 copy per turn. Fun fact, this card and Hero's Bond are actually the only 2 non-monsters to be considered members of the all-caps hero combined archetype. Not that it matters, but it's neat trivia. As for its effects, I think it's actually a really solid card. A draw 3 is awesome for comeback ability, even with those kinds of restrictions. And before Pot of Avarice came back, it was probably your go-to for recycling your lost fusions. Only real drawback is it's a bit dead in hand on your first turn, and the fact it doesn't work well with Mask Heroes since they don't have materials. Still, a great card all around. A Hero Lives is a normal spell that states if you control no face-up monsters, you can pay half your life points to special summon a level 4 or lower E-hero from your deck. One of the few hero cards to have ever been on the Forbidden Unlimited list, and currently only as of this script being written, although that may change soon if the OCG inspires anything over here. And it's there for a good reason too, because opening it was basically a free Dark Claw without even wasting your normal summon. It still is, technically, but you can make even more pretty insane plays by using that extra summon to throw out a Stratos or something from right at the beginning of the game. It's probably also the highest cost Ash Blossom bait in the entire game. Skydive Scorcher is a normal spell that states you can target one elemental hero fusion monster you control, destroy as many monsters your opponent controls as possible, with attack higher than that monster's, and then inflict damage to your opponent equal to the highest original attack among those destroyed cards in your graveyard. Your choice if tied. And if you have Skyscraper on your field, you can inflict damage equal to the combined attack of all those destroyed cards instead. A tragedy of a wasted opportunity with this one. This card had the very unfortunate honor of coming out right around the time we got cards like Raigeki back and Mass Destruction was becoming less and less powerful. That horrifically sobering realization of power creep notwithstanding, this card is already outshined by how useful and more consistent Absolute Zero is. Another one for my boy. Honestly, when this card came out, I could barely even draw into it, much less test its viability. A great idea at the worst possible time. Double Hero Attack is a quick play, and if you control a fusion monster that lists Neos as material, target one hero fusion monster in your graveyard and special summon it, ignoring summoning conditions. You can only activate one copy per turn. This is definitely more of a Neo support card than a hero support card, but when the hell else am I gonna talk about this? You're not likely to run in a pure Neos deck, that's for sure. Anyway, like I said, any card that is basically a monster reborn for hero fusions and bypasses that dumb restriction is pretty cool in my book, but this one requires a bit too specific of a deck theme to make any decent use out of. Generation Next is our last quick play spell, and it states if your life points are lower than your opponent's, you can add to your hand or special summon one E-Hero, Karibo, or Neospatian from your deck or graveyard with attack less than or equal to the difference in your opponent's life points. For the rest of the turn, you cannot activate cards or the effects of cards with the same name as that card, and you can only activate one copy per turn. Another amazing artwork, this time homaging the original GX intro. Just a super cool visual, no matter what its effect ended up being. Thankfully, it got a decent effect to go along with it. It's a bit too clunky to be high tier or anything, but come on, we're playing heroes here. That was never really in the cards. Anyway, let's just have some fun with it. Seriously though, this thing can combo pretty decently with a hero lives, set you up during your opponent's turn for a comeback, you know, all that good stuff. Our first and only equipped spell is Favorite Hero, and that is a sobering thought for me because of how many stupid specific niche support cards we got in the first video. Equip only to a level 5 or higher hero monster. If you control a card in your field zone, the equipped monster gains attack equal to its original defense. Also, your opponent cannot target it with card effects. At the start of the battle phase, you can activate one field spell directly from your hand or deck. You can only use this effect of Favorite Hero once per turn. When the equipped monster attacks and destroys an opponent's monster by battle, you can send this card to the graveyard. The attacking monster can make a second attack in a row. How I wish we had a better field spell to make use of how awesome this card is. It's gotta be one of the most fun and inventive elemental hero support cards released in the past couple of years, and it is such a shame that its potential is hindered by a lack of decent field spells to complement it. If you do actually manage to make it work though, it is immensely satisfying equipping it to your actual favorite hero and swing for game in true anime fashion. Our first trap card is Terra Firma Gravity, a normal trap that states, during your opponent's battle phase, if you control elemental hero Terra Firma this turn, all level 4 or lower monsters your opponent controls that can attack a face-up Terra Firma you control must attack it, and cannot attack otherwise. That is a very bizarre way to word that. Well, we were on a good streak. Figures a random mid-2000s manga card would butt in to slap some cold hard reality back into us. This card is horrible. I don't even want to explain why. It's just plainly obvious. Please don't play it, for my sake just as much as yours. Our last trap card, and the final card in this entire series of videos, is appropriately Magistry Alchemist. Banish 4 hero monsters from your graveyard and or face up on the field, then target 1 hero monster in your graveyard, special summon it ignoring summoning conditions. If you banish earth, water, fire, and wind attributes to activate this effect, the monster's original attack becomes doubled, and also you can negate the effects of all face up cards your opponent currently controls. You can only activate 1 copy per turn. Okay, so on its own, maybe it's just another reborn for your fusion monsters, which I like. Maybe you only get the over-the-top anime stuff if you set up 4 different elements, basically necessitating a very certain type of deck build, basically useless in modern mixed, mostly dark hero. And sure, it being a trap makes it inherently slow, but I love this card. It is over the top, it is ridiculous, it is the kind of wacky, unexpected comeback your opponent won't see coming until it's too late, and I cannot think of a better elemental hero card, or Jaden Yuki card, than that. Elemental Heroes were an instant hit the moment they debuted, and GX getting its own spin-off meant that it had plenty of room to keep expanding its ideas from both a visual standpoint and a game design one. Beyond the Heroes alone arguably redirected the direction of not just the E-Hero line, but all of the hero archetypes we've covered in this series. While the visual design for the new ones have skewed much closer to the anime aesthetic, the manga heroes are arguably more important to the deck's longevity and popularity, due in no small part in Konami opting to completely change nearly every one of them for the TCG. Elemental Heroes are a juggernaut in this game, to the point they're easily the most popular archetype that ever came out of the anime, and arguably the entire game. It may have taken them a long time to stick that landing, but they've rightfully earned their spot in the Yu-Gi-Oh! Hall of Fame for all time. And they also gave me the one monster I'll never stop being obsessed over. So, thanks for that one, Kageyama-san. Well, that's it. I've finished what I started, covering every hero monster in the game, with some minor exceptions for various reasons. It's been an insane journey to get to this point, and I've grown both as a person, a duelist, a Yu-Gi-Oh! Fan, and as a creative in the time I've been making this series of videos. I can't say it was always a joy for me behind the scenes, but I will say I am eternally grateful for everybody who has ever helped me along the way, and most of all, I'm thankful to all of you for watching. And what's next? Well, there's still some stuff I neglected to cover for one reason or another, and there is stuff that's come out since and will continue to come out that will make these videos a bit outdated. But start to finish, a history of Hero is no more. So how will I cover these things from now on? Well, just stay tuned. Thanks for watching, folks. Have a great day, and even better tomorrow. Remember to always keep up the chase, keep moving on, and now and forever, get your game on!
まっすぐまっすぐまっすぐ前を見つめてガッチャ